Hi, Bob. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
So you are running for county auditor. You stepped down from your role in the legislature. So tell us a little bit about your decision and why the change of heart and why running for county auditor.
Well, I've always had the idea in my mind as forefront is that running for office is not something to take lightly, and so I made a commitment to my constituents that every 2 years I'd reevaluate whether I should stay or not, and I did that 4 times. This time is the first time that, as I prayed about it, I just wasn't feeling peace about staying state representative, and I knew at least one person that I thought could take my place and do a fabulous job. So I started saying, "So God, what would you have me do then instead?" And in the conversations I had with constituents pretty much all over, the auditor's office came up over and over and over again as a place that needed new leadership. And so I prayed about it, felt peace about it. My wife said, "You mean you could be home more? What a blessing." and she has been such a great supporter and has put up with me traveling so much. And I'm so thankful for her. So part of this is also honoring my wife, Heather, and being able to serve locally. I do believe I have the skill set to be able to do that.
Right. And so the auditor's office covers quite a lot of things: marriage licensing, department licensing, so on and so forth. What challenges do you see in that office that you on the outside looking in and you going, "Yeah, I can do something"?
Well, basically, it's treating all the money that the auditor's office has to operate as not my money, my own little personal pool to do whatever I please. I want to follow the Constitution. I want to make sure there's real transparency in everything that we do. And I don't think, in the last 10 years, many people who work in the auditor's office have ever been asked, "Hey, what do you think we're doing right? What do you think we're doing wrong? What are some ways you think we could improve that?" And, people who are asked their opinion, if you're communicating that they matter as people, job satisfaction goes up. People who love their work do great work. I found in 20 years as a kindergarten teacher. And I mean, there's no unimportant workers unless they're not doing their job. And that would be just kind of the bottom line. If someone didn't want to do their job, then yes, we'd have to figure out a way to allow them to leave. So,
right. And it's biblical that any type of work in any form is gratifying. It satisfies you. We're wired to work, and so we gain a sense of self-pride and self-satisfaction from doing it, and accomplishment, which is important as individuals. So one of the big, and I agree with you, actually, I want to touch back on something that you said, that employees who feel respected, like they're heard, that their concerns are met, they have a level of respect for any boss, whether it's in in any governmental body, or whether it's a local business. A lot of turnover happens because people who ought not be supervisors, and they don't treat people very well, especially the people they work that work for them. And so, I always urge, the small businesses that I work with in my accounting practice, I always urge them, be respectful, be lenient, be gracious, but there's a hard line. There's a hard line between
definitely
being a good boss and being a respectful boss to being overrun. And so there is a balance for sure. But I would agree with you that being someone who is respected by your employees makes them want to come to work, makes them want to serve and to serve you and the community. Mm-hmm. And so I just wanted to touch on that because I think that was a great point.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a huge priority for me.
Yeah. And so one of the things and one of the recurring themes that has been ongoing since the 2020 election is election integrity. And so no matter where on the political spectrum that you stand on this issue, whether you think something went on, you didn't think something went on, or you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, the reality is we should all want transparency, and we should all want an election process that we can trust. Democrat, Republican, Independent, Progressive, it doesn't matter. We all need that safety, that security to know that I trust that my vote counted, and all the votes counted that were legitimate. And so recently, the Secretary of State passed a bill that prohibited third parties, unauthorized third parties, from going into the polling stations and auditing the software and hardware. And they've derived this bill from something that happened in Colorado, and under the guise of, they stole the software and so on, and there could be manipulation. And so what solutions do we have that would prevent that from happening, but also allow for third-party access to allow us to audit the vote?
Well, we have to have local control, number one. And I would think that the auditor's office is, first of all, responsible to the citizens who live in the county. And by being transparent and accountable to those people, you can't do that when the state's in charge of it or the federal government's in charge of that. The line of people you have to go through to actually get anything done is way too long. And I think being able to have local control when it comes to being transparent in everything you do, to make sure that the voter rolls are updated, for the auditor's office, we're talking specifically, is incredibly important. It's not easy work, but it's not impossible, and it's something that the auditor's office should be doing all of the time. And having that local county control and even some city control, because if we're ever going to do, voting in person again, which I love the idea of doing that and making it permissible, and let individual counties make that decision. Hey, do you want to vote in person? Okay. And if that passes, then we'll allow that to happen. It's probably going to have to come from the state, but I have good relationships with both Republicans and Democrats where we could make it permissible.
Right.
Easily, I think.
And there should not be an exclusivity to how you vote, because we always hear about you're ostracizing one group and alienating one group of people. Well, I think when we talk about ostracizing and alienating a group of people, I don't know many people in their late 70s and 80s that really can get on their cell phone and do something, or get on their computer and do something like register to vote, change their address, and so on. Yeah. And so it gives them a dual opportunity: one, to update their voter registration information, and two, drop their ballot at the same time, instead of having to go to two different locations depending on where you live within the county to do these things. So there are reasons, and good reasons, to why we should open the doors and let people do it in person. And I think it just builds a good sense of community. And you might be misaligned with the person in front of you, but you guys might start talking, and you might realize real quick that, hey, we're not enemies. We might disagree on some stuff, but but we're neighbors, and we can disagree on these things and still have a nice, cordial conversation.
Well, and that's a great point, because as a country, as a county, as cities, we've never been more divided than we are right now. And I've found, as a legislator, that I just haven't had those problems. I have friends that are serving across the aisle from me, both senators and Republicans, and even if I disagree with them, I know how to talk with them, and I know how to figure out where they're coming from, and yes, I've brought the state constitution up repeatedly in certain arenas with those representatives, because if it's not constitutional, then in order to do it, you should be amending the Constitution instead of trying to pass a bill that will glide under the radar. And that's the problem with Washington Administrative Code, that's all been written by agency employees.
Right.
Okay, and there's not been a lot of transparency about how things have changed because of rewriting those things. It took me 3 years to get the Department of Children, Youth, and Families to release the updated WACs. And wow, did it give more power to that agency that it probably shouldn't have ever had.
Yeah. I mean, and we see this in the fight for the Pfizer studies, where Pfizer asked for 75 years to release documentation, and fortunately, a judge said, no, you have 2 years, and you're going to release so many pages per month. And thank God that we had a judge that was of sound mind and realized that, hey, this doesn't make sense. We can't wait. The public deserve an answer faster than 75 years. So one of the things that this bill does is it gives the Secretary of State, and going back to the bill regarding the auditing of the machines and software, it gives the Secretary of State the sole authorization and the subjective authorization to determine who is allowed to audit. And now that's a partisan office. So this begs the question, no matter who is holding that office, Republican, Democrat, or other, that should give us pause.
Oh, absolutely. And I brought it up before, the worst thing this does is it takes the reins away from your local auditor to do that. And for me to say that, Seattle is going to be the same as Spokane Valley when it comes to these issues, oh no, they're going to be way different. And so having local control benefits everybody, whether they're Republicans or Democrats. This is not majority rule. This is something that should be discussed in public on a regular basis, in my mind.
And in the local control, and I asked Vicki Dalton this question, if the Secretary of State said, I'm going to give the counties the control over this bill, so I passed this bill, and you guys are the ones that now need to make the decision who is authorized and who is not authorized. Would you be okay with that? Would you be okay with making those determinations and determining who comes in? Obviously, there would need to be objective criteria to fit these. You can't just have Joe come in with his laptop. But this is something I think that both parties can work on together and find objective third parties that work for us, the constituency, to ensure transparency. Would you be willing to take that on and say, I will shepherd this, and I will see this through for my constituency, and I will take this on?
I will absolutely do that. That's not just a campaign promise. It's something that, because I've always been for transparency and for local control, because, if you compare Spokane County to King County, wow, talk about the differences. Now, if King County wants to run however they want to run things, more power to them. But we should be appealing locally to people. And right now, I don't think that there's equal representation when it comes to how the auditor does their work, and the number of times I've heard from observers. One was here today who had volunteered to observe in my last election 2 years ago, and he said, "Yeah, I got talked to for about 2 hours, along with a bunch of other people, and then we were placed 30 feet away behind a plexiglass screen, and we couldn't see anything that was going on." Now, if we'd been up close, we wouldn't have been able to tell signatures and things like that. We just wanted to make sure that we knew where the ballots were coming from, and that there was a clean chain of custody, and there has to be, and it should. There's that camera that's not hooked up to anything right there. If that was hooked up, if Democrat votes weren't being counted correctly, then, because as a Republican, I could see people saying, well, I'm a Democrat and I assume that you're not going to count my vote accurately. And I would say, okay, well, let's look at the process. Let's take your ballot, for instance, and trace it all the way through. Is this how you voted?
Yeah.
I mean, this is not brain surgery here.
Yeah, and what's funny is the Vote While website, you go on, you log in, and I logged in, and I wanted to look at who I voted for, right? Not because I don't know, but because I want to check. Yeah. Why can I not see my own ballot and who I voted for on the Vote While website? Yeah. So that was something that I was like, well, that's kind of concerning because I can verify that individually. And if individuals have the power to audit themselves only, that in itself would give us the transparency truly we needed, because then we the people have the power to say this is or this is not who I vote for. Then we can determine whether election integrity exists. Now, exactly. Onto your point about cameras, I know that there are some states that do have cameras and do allow them, and they have never worried about the signatory issue. Their cameras are so far away that, at least we can see if someone's doing something they ought not to be without giving any signatures away or addresses or names. And in fact, cameras hold people honest. Cameras really do hold people honest, because if you are public facing and we can see this happening in front of us, and then there's a camera malfunction or whatever there may be, then there's like, okay, what's going on? Why did this camera malfunction at this time? And this happened. We know this happened. Yeah. And so I think that I don't understand why we cannot have cameras in ballot counting rooms. It doesn't make sense to me in my mind. There are absolutely ways that we can protect people, protect their identity, protect their vote without while still allowing for that transparency.
I totally agree with you. I think that there's, and I believe this in the depths of my heart, that things are going to be changing when it comes to who. Now, we won't change the governor. He's not up for re-election yet, but I think in this time, in this place, there's going to be some changes. But those changes can't happen if there's any monkey business happening anywhere.
Right.
When it comes to the voting process, when it comes to making sure that everything's transparent, when it comes to counting the vote too, and I'll just quickly give you an example of Thurston County. Now, a lady who actually lived in a homeless camp, came to a good friend of mine who works on election integrity stuff, and she said, I have a problem, and let me make very clear, I'm a Democrat, I'm very liberal, I advocate for I'm an unelected leader in the homeless camp. Some people came out 4 months ago and said, hey, we're here to register you to vote. And it's amazing how many homeless people actually have, ID that you can prove. And so they registered them all to vote and says, okay, well, let's just go from here. So the week of the election, a bunch of them went down to the auditor's office and said, hey, we're here to vote. The auditor there said, I have clear proof that your ballots have already been voted.
Wow.
And so that was the beginning of just this huge tornado of, wow, this homeless group who normally vote exclusively Democrat are being told that their votes didn't count because they didn't get to vote.
Right.
And I think, without having cameras, without having all the things that will hold everybody accountable, stuff like that can happen. And it only takes one employee to make that happen.
Right, or one postal worker not delivering the ballots and so on. And I will say that, on the issue of election integrity, it definitely is a nonpartisan issue. It's definitely something that everyone should be worried about. Like you said, those homeless people, they voted staunch Democrats. They were voting Democrat. It isn't about that. It's about, hey, someone took my vote. That's my constitutional right. And so that should alarm anyone. That should absolutely alarm anyone. So can you just let people know where they can get in contact with you if they have any questions?
Well, basically, it's electbobmccaslin.com, but on the back of all my doorbellers is my cell number, and so that's 509-994-9836. And I'd be happy to talk to anybody who's interested in why I'm running and what I'm promising to do. It's again, I don't think this is brain surgery. This former kindergarten teacher has done over 55 different jobs in his whole life and not been fired except for once. And that
wasn't from the state legislature.
No, it wasn't.
Let's make that clear.
Yeah, and it was when I was 15 years old and just didn't know what the rules were in the back room of Rosar's where I worked. But I pled guilty and got fired for it. But that's okay. I mean, there's no such thing as a bad experience if you learn from it.
Amen.
Really.
ElectBobMcCaslin.com.
Yes.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks. Appreciate it.